I don't think that should be a real issue. What I was thinking was, we can go with some basic things, what I could not complete yesterday. Maybe I'll take some time, but I just want to make it more clear and then proceed on the further subject. That's what I wish. So, Hari Om, we connect that. Have you gone through this kind of a chart or this kind of description? Yes. Fine, correct. So, in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, that Chaturvanyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhavashu. So, these four varnas, which are created by the Lord, they are not based upon the birth as we normally understand, right? They are based upon Guna and Karma, depending upon the Guna. Now, Guna or the attribute, what does it mean? The Guna of the Prakriti. Guna of the Prakriti. And we know that there are three Gunas of the Prakriti or the Maya, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And whatever we see in this world can be understood in terms of its composition as Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. There is no single entity which can be considered as completely Sattva or completely Tamas or completely Rajas. There is always going to be a blend amongst these three. Correct? And that is a nature. Tamas is not required because at the end of the day we get tired and we just want to take a rest. Or even during daytime sometimes we want to lie down and take a rest. But tamas is integral. It is not something which is to be always discarded. It's a part and part of the existence. Correct? Rajas is activity what we are studying karma yoga. If there is no rajas, we cannot do any karma. So rajas also has a place. Sattva also has a place. At the same time, these three gunas also have the limitations and they have to be transcended. That's what they say. So as long as we are living in this phenomenal world, we are experiencing the phenomenal world, these three gunas are going to play their part. Correct? So I hope you have studied this way, what we call it as Shudra. It's not by birth, but wherever there is a preponderance of tamas. That is inertia, inactivity, dullness of life. And after tamas, what will be there? Only rajas. Sattva cannot immediately precede that because they don't go together. So if there is a preponderance of tamas, there has to be next is rajas, and then there has to be sattva. That is called as Shudra. That is a man of inactivity, dullness like that. And that is what we call it as samsari, as yesterday we were trying to discuss. And the main goal will be for what? Earth and Kam, two Purusharthas, correct? Even for that they will not be ready because they are not willing to work activity. Then the mind, state of mind, in that state, what is that called as? Mood avastha, correct? So English word, the more than that, I think the Hindi word you better understanding. Mood avastha means you are completely dull, you are not comprehending anything like that, and that's a state. And that is called as Shudra avastha. So whenever we follow in that particular condition, we should understand that we are leading a Shukra life. And because there is always Shukra, it can always change from one time to another. Right? And then the next is Vaishyavasa. So what is that? Predominance is Rajas. And then next to that is Tamas. So Rajas is in between. So after Rajas, both can follow. So Sattva as well as Tamas. So then there is Tamasa and then there is a Sattva at the end. Correct? So this, if you have this kind of a disposition of mind, then that mind is called as what? Mood, and then this is called as Chipta. This is called as a Chipta. These are all part of Yoga Sutra. You might have studied, but just to connect it with the kind of yogas which you are studying, and just doing it analytical from my side and just trying to relate how does it connect. So what does Chipta say? It's a restless mind, scattered mind, It won't be there here because they are all reasonably concentrating, right? But sometimes, we are in that state of mind that there is nothing sticking to the mind. Just like a wind coming, and the leaves are oscillating constantly, like that. So wind is there and leaves are oscillating constantly. There is no scattered mind, restless mind, not able to focus any subject, any particular idea, like that. Right? So yesterday what we were discussing is Sansari. Where do you fall? Where do you think that you fall here? So basically, we can call it both ways. What we call it as Shudra, what we call it as Vaishya, both can be the attributes of Sansari person. Both is possible. Then you go one step further, and that is called as a Kshatriya. So that is predominated by Rajas. We know all people who are in politics or in sociology, they cannot afford to lead a life like what we are leading. We prefer to sit in seclusion and do sadhana. That cannot do. They have to be active. And then on the military front, he cannot afford to do that. So he has to be full of Rajas. And I will talk about that a little more later. But just since a point has come, let me tell you. Sivananda Swamiji Maharaj, in his book Gita Vision, he has told a very interesting thing. That the karma or the action determines the dynamics of the individual and the collective as a whole. What does it mean? That whatever actions we do at individual level, that will determine the future of our own, because we will get the karma fala according to that. Likewise, this is the law of cause and effect, because it's all bound by the law of cause and effect, karma law of report. Likewise, it also happens at the level of samashti. That when a group of people together, as a military, as we witnessed in our case very recently, or to be even more recent, the way you are all sitting together here, and we are all, including me, what we are doing is samashti karma. And there is samashti prarabdha also, like that. So, whatever fate which we have in our life is not individual fate, but that's collective fate also. In the air crash, unfortunate air crash, you find so many people losing their lives, or during Corona time, so many people afflicted. That's called samashti prarabdha, not the yashti prarabdha. So the collective actions what we do also determines our prarabdha or the future, and that is samashti prarabdha. So karma has got a significance both ways, at the individual level as well as at the collective level. And both are interconnected. Both are interconnected. That's a beautiful thing to understand. So what I do, my actions do not bind or do not affect me only. It affects people in my vicinity. It affects people in my surroundings also. So if you do good work, wherever you are living, in your family, in your society, by your good work, in one way or the other people also will stand to benefit. See, sometimes if you are very happy, in very exhilarating mood, other people also around you become happy. If you are depressed, anybody outside may not be much concerned, but still he will feel some kind of fatigue will come to him. So, individual actions do not affect only individual prarabdha, but they also affect samashti prarabdha in some way. And likewise, the corollary, what you call, is the samashti prarabdha, samashti karma also affects the individual fate. We are all sitting here, correct? And if some of us is not able to get so well tuned, so well trained, there are examples that happened here, but I don't want to spend time and give example here. When a person coming here with a completely negative bent of mind, with the preparedness that you want to go on the first day or second day after the courses, or that mental state a person comes here, it's a very interesting instance. I will tell you some other time when there is more time. But when you are sitting here, somehow the influence of all others also affect us. So when we do good karma, we are getting a benefit for us as well as for the samashti. So karma, twofold things are there ultimately. The one thing is that when we do karma religiously, faithfully, diligently, even with expectation of fruits, even with expectation of fruits, there is going to be karma phala. So good karmas will have good karma phala, bad karmas will have bad karma phala. So karma is inevitable, karma is good even when done with the intention of karma phala. Because majority of us do that way only karma. And it cannot be for void, it cannot be for nothing. Right? So that karma has got significance even with expectation of fruit. That is why Bhagwan also says, Artharthi also, why God welcomes that, As long as we don't do anything unethical, anything which is opposed to religion, that dharma, then there is no problem. And the other important thing is that first is idleness. So Bhagavad Gita as a whole, this is how there is a transition, if you understand the whole thing. That if you are in a state of tamasa, or the inactivity, the God will ask you to get up, first start working. It doesn't start with karma yoga straight away. Right? The first stage is you are transitioning from inaction to action. You are transitioning from inaction to action. You don't afford to be idle, that you do work even with expectation of fruit, whatever it is like that. So that is how karma is not to be dismissed completely. Because in the body we cannot live without karma. How can karma be completely negative? Right? But then, having realized that, you have to understand the limitations of that. That's the whole thing. So having come up to the second stage of Vaishya, then you go to the next stage, that is So what is that? The first is Rajas. And then there is a Sattva. So Sattva, whenever is backing up Rajas, then that Rajas, or the activity goes in a more positive direction. You always tend to do something which is good, for other people around you also. You try to think well of others. You have some place for Ishvara in your life also. So Rajas is not bad when it is backed up by Sattva. Tamas will always be there at the end. You can't have completely Sattva as Tamas state like that. So in this connection, when we say Kshatriya, what shall we call here? In that connection of that Sansari, in Karma Yogi, like that we are saying, correct? So what shall we call here? That attributes, nobody is written like this, let me tell you. I am just trying to analyze and think how we correlate the definition of Karma Yoga and the Jnana Yoga. We do it as an act of offering to Ishvara. We do the action as a part of our Swadharma. And in that process, the law of karma, the law of cause and effect will become inconsequential. That will not bind us. That is the liberating force of karma. Right? That when the karma transforms into karma yoga, at that time the actions that we perform do not have any binding on us. And when we come here, take a birth, we already have got a good package. A lot of vasanas and sanskaras are there. And when we go there, we end up sometimes taking more karma. Just as it happens in our journey, that we start with 15 kg baggage, thanks to airlines, And once you return, that you have got a bigger baggage and how to manage that. So that's what happens in our life also. But the goal of life is the package, the bundle, of that karma phala which we have brought has to be reduced. It has not to be increased. If at best it is to be eliminated, but then if not eliminated, no fine. Let it be reduced. That is what the karma yoga is there. So here when you say Kshatriya like that, it is not about Kshatriya or karma yoga. You don't take it that way. But we are just trying to relate how karma yoga should relate to that. And in case of Vyavahara also, if you say, what you will call it? The second stage can be also working personal, all business and everything can be called Vaishya. So when you say Kshatriya, that is Vikshipta Avastha. That is a Vikshipta Avastha. What is that? Vikshipta and Vikshipta, how are they different? Kshipta and Vikshipta, we have studied in Yoga Sutra. Huh? Constantly oscillating like that. Vikshipta Avastha is basically partially focused mind. You can say it is partially focused mind. So it gives you some little ability, that you are able to concentrate. And after some time the mind will flicker here and there. And that's what happens in our case also many times also, correct? That once we are there, then we concentrate sometimes, then the mind goes again, we get that. That happens not in class necessarily, but in every walk of life it happens, They're able to connect, disconnect like that. So when they're able to, so vikshipta avastha is slightly better avastha, correct? And that is what we can consider it in that way. So mood avastha, kshipta avastha, vikshipta avastha. More of a yoga actually, correct? But we try to relate with this subject which we are studying here. And that will be all kind of professionals which are there, working persons are there, like that we can put in that condition because there is some concentration they are working in that. And the highest state in this phenomenal world is what is called as Brahman. So here there is a predominance of Sattva, backed up by Rajas, and again backed up by Tamas at the end. Correct? So this state in our dharma also, Sannyasa Ashram is the last side of sannyasi. And at that time, the focus his mind is concentrating not on other things, but mainly focusing on the ultimate goal of life, what you consider. And that is called Vividisa Sannyasi, who does not have too much of work. What is his work? Vividisa Sannyasi? Swamiji in some of his books writes, his work is what? Main meditation. Meditation on the self, in whatever form, Saguna, Sakar, Nirguna, Nirakar, wherever. And Saucha and Diksha. These are the only jobs which a good sannyasi has to do. So, when we are discussing Vividisa Sannyasi yesterday, that can be called as the attributes of what normally are Brahmin. So, why man can be born in any kind of a caste? That's not important, But ultimately, if you have the attributes which make our personality like a Brahmin, that is a one search for the truth. The only difference is that a scientist or a sociologist or somebody doing research in social sciences will want to focus on phenomenal world, what the world is made up of. They will not think in terms of Sattvaras, Tamas, Guna. Understand that? They will think more in terms of elemental composition and how the physics work. Physics is science of fundamental world. That's what they say. All those physical world, basic physical things they will try to see. But there again, the goal is they want to search the truth. And wherever they start, the priori method and posteriori method, this will become posteriori method here. They may do in music, they may do in art, they may do in literature, they may do in science. But ultimately they will go and end up in that one and non-dual Brahman only because it is that one and non-dual Brahman which is manifested in this world as Kshetra. That is, they are searching the Kshetra, they are searching the field. And the sannyasi is searching what? Kshetragna. He is searching Kshetragna. Both are searching the truth. But one is searching a Kshetra. The other one is searching in the Kshetragna, who am I? That is the only difference. But the goal is search of truth. So that is what here we need to understand like this, That Bhagavad Gita physically tells us that we have to go from inaction to action. That's the first thing. Every individual in this life, whether he is a seeker or non-seeker, whether he leads any even mortal life, a person has to be doing action. Then comes that Karma Yoga. Wisdom-filled action, what we were saying yesterday, in Sivananda Maharaj's word. They act wisely. Wisely you do virtuous act, and that will bring you good fruits. You do action which will bring fruits to everybody. That's one part of it. And ultimately, you want to see that you want the whole creation of Ishvara to be benefited. And do I work as an offering to God, as a Samarpan Bhavana, and there is a well-being of the whole world. So that is the phenomenon of Karma Yoga. So whether you follow that Karma Yoga path or Vividisa Sannyasi path, that is not the end. That is not the end. Then what is the end? When we say these four attributes in terms of Guna, starting from Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya and Brahmin, like that. Right? Don't go by caste. Let us go by the inner constituent in terms of the Gunas. So if you achieve the Brahmana state as mentioned here, full of Sattva, backed up by Rajas and Tamas, is this the end? No. Then what is required? Transcendental is a very, very difficult word, but it is the right word, nevertheless, Because why difficult I am saying? When you say transcend, means you go rise above. So rise above, sattva, rajas and this tamas. So all our, if you study the basic Vedanta, you will find, that some of the organs like Antahkarana is made up of sattva, prana is made up of rajas like that, tamas like that. So we are fully identifying ourselves with our physical, psychophysical existence, It is difficult for us to visualize myself beyond my body, beyond my mind, beyond my intellect, beyond my ahankara. But then that's the truth of life, That Nistari Gundu Bhavarjuna, that is one of the basic definitions of Karma Yoga also, that we need to transcend these three gunas. Sattva is good. It takes up to some point, yesterday some gentleman was discussing with me, that sattva, why we need to transcend sattva when we say that the whole goal of sadhana is making life full of sattva. Yeah, and sattva is also a barrier, very thin barrier, just like a glass barrier. The glass is there here, and on the back side you see something, the truth you see, so sattva, but you cannot catch hold of that, because sattva becomes a barrier in that case. So that sattva is also Vishnu sattva as they call here, and then it has to be transformed into Shuddha sattva, what is characterized by Ma Saraswati, that's Shuddha sattva like that, And the Shuddha sattva ultimately merges into Parabrahman. So ultimately that is the state, and in very common language they exemplify like this, that you have got this aircraft, correct? An aircraft has to be lifted. So we use various rockets. So rocket will take the aircraft up to a particular height in the space, and then rocket has to give off itself. Rocket cannot go beyond that, correct? So rocket is important, Rocket is not to be avoided. But then at some point of time, rocket has to be given up. Sivananda Swamiji Maharaj also used to give some another very simple example, that the aircraft is there. The aircraft is flying in the skies, And always, somebody he thinks, I'm just in the space, what the land has, what has to do for me? My role, my job is just to fly in the sky. What is this soil, what earth point? But then it is only the same aircraft when it is taking the runway of the taxiway, what we call, that it is able to rise further. Even for that level also, that earth support is required. So likewise, for transcending this guna, also sattva support is required. But then we must know when to give it. And blemish of the intellect, there is a very good article of Swamiji also, that mind is rajas, intellect is sattva, and that also creates a hurdle. But that hurdle is much later. We should not worry about that hurdle. The first goal is we should be able to reach, and that make our interior full of sattva. And then we can certainly go there. Correct? So this is the whole essence, that ultimately that we go from inaction to action, and action to karma yoga. We are within the influence of the power of the law of cause and effect, law of karma. And then at some point of time, we have to go beyond that law of causation, law of karma, law of cause and effect, and that's the ultimate stage. And we need not wait for that. There also they say, that the sukrute, duskute, all kinds of karma, whether you have good karma or the bad karma, all have to be transcended. Why? Because good karma will have good fruits, bad karmas will have bad fruit. They say that supposing, in very simple language, people say if you perform bad action then you go to hell. If you do good karma then you go to heaven, like that they say. But then heaven is also not a place for ultimate liberation. In a very common sense, when we are growing up, we know that heaven, is the goal of life and we should try to do that. But there should not be an expectation of transcending to heaven also, because that also is for exhausting our punya karma. So any action if we do, good action or bad action, but with a motive, with an expectation of fruit, in that case it will liberate that karma phala. And as long as karma phala is there, the cycle of birth and death will continue. That's not liberation. Even if you are able to attain that swarga or heaven as they call. That is not the goal of life. So they say deities are living in swarga. But deities also want that they should get a human birth. Because that is not a place for liberation. That is a place for bhoga only. To enjoy your good fruits, when they are exhausted, you come back. The goal of life is not just good action or the bad action, but there is a word called Naishkarmya. Right? In Bhagavad Gita, you must have learned that, Naishkarmya. So Naishkarmya is the ultimate goal. Akarma to karma, Karma Yoga and finally Naishkarma. And Naishkarma is not non-doing of work, correct? Naishkarma is what? That even in the midst of the plurality, vicissitudes of the work of the world, you feel I am the witness. You feel I am the instrument, correct? Sometimes in Karma Yoga they call Nimitta Bhava, I am only the instrument in the hands of Lord. But in Karma Yoga, still there is Ahankara. Even in that so-called Nimitta Bhava also, we say that there is I am the doer, the feeling is there. Sometimes when we do good work also, we say it's on God's grace, why that has happened, I have done nothing like that. We may say that, we may think also that we are genuinely, nothing wrong in that. But still, that doership is there. And that is why they say that ultimately, beyond this particular Nimitta Bhava also, what is that Bhava? Beyond that? We want to go beyond Nimitta Bhava, what shall we call? Sakshi Bhava. We call it Sakshi Bhava. Here we are instrumental, we feel, but still we are a doer. By God's grace we are doing. God helps me doing work. But Sakshi Bhava is you are not the doer. In Sakshi Bhava, you say, there is a sloka in Bhagavad Gita, Guna Guneshu Vartante. All this Prakriti, what is happening, is by the power of Guna. I am not the doer, I am just the witness, I am seeing what is happening around me. I am not doer, I am not doing even a good thing, something happens from me, then also it is the Prakriti which does. I have not done anything. If I say something, if I listen something, if I written something, I may say, this Prakriti has done it. I am the witness. In Nimitta Bhava, you feel that I have done it with the grace of God, with the grace of Gurudeva. And then there comes Sakshi Bhava. So there you are the witness of what is happening. You don't attach yourself with the act. And because you are not attaching with the act, because you are not Karta, you are not Bhokta also. The moment we are the actor, we experience. So if you want to be transcendent in this, then that's the whole thing. And if you know that Pancha Kosha, Pancha Kosha Vivek also might have, maybe a little bit of small thing you can say in the Vedanta class also, that Karta Bhav is attributed to Vijnanamaya Kosha. Is attributed to Vijnanamaya Kosha. That when we have this happy, unhappy, thirsty, angry, they are lower things. But that Vijnanamaya Kosha, intellectual seat, when you identify with that, that is basically Karta. And when you identify yourself with the bliss seat, Anandamaya. Anandamaya Kosha is not the Paramatma. Anandamaya Kosha is very close to that. But then still, we are experiencing the Ananda and it's still not the Supreme Ananda that is there. Or that Anandamaya Kosha is experienced or the Bhokta. So if you are eating a mango, any beautiful fruit, something like that, or maybe you are touching somebody who is very close to you, or any kind of a joy if you derive. At that moment, there is no duality. At that moment, there is no duality. There is a non-duality. And that is Anandamaya Kosha. Even during waking state, it will be there. Not only in a sleep state. Right? And that still the order is there. Anandamaya means anything in God knows. That's the biggest area. Very difficult to transcend. And ultimately, we are able to transcend that. And then we can get to that supreme reality. So Sakshi Bhava, what they call, is also not the ultimate. In Vedanta class, they say like this, Nimitta Bhava is fine. Sakshi Bhava is also not fine. Because Sakshi Bhava is also with respect to Sakshya. So I am witnessing something, so I am the witness of that. But if I do not identify, if I don't take cognizance of that also, Sakshi Bhava also doesn't stay. But they are also very high things. So we should not think that this is something lower, very high Bhava. But still there is something higher and higher than that. So first we can cultivate Nimitta Bhava, then we can cultivate Sakshi Bhava, and then we can go beyond that. When we realize that Tattva-masi, Tat and Tom are not different, then the Sakshi Bhava also will go away. Right? Now just to say something very briefly. I missed the page just a minute. In Bhagavad Gita, as I said, the second chapter, basically it all starts with Jnana Yoga. That part we will see little later when we discuss a little bit about the Upanishads. But then posteriorly, I am also not a very well-read person in Upanishads. Whatever little I understand, which we will try to see, and then more on Jnana Yoga. But as I said, posteriorly method refers most to Karma Yoga. And through that we transcend by purifying the intellect. So what that Karma Yoga is there? You have already spoken in your own language. Just see a couple of verses. How God says, He says, Traigunya Vishya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavargana, Nirdvango, Nitya Sattvasto, Nidyoga Kshema, Atmavan. So this is the 45th verse of 2nd chapter. And what we saw here, Traigunya Vishya Veda. So Vedas and the scriptures and this Srishti is all about these gunas. And our ultimate goal is what? You should be able to transcend them. Nistraigunya Bhavargana. So Arjuna is considered, name also is not significant, why the name is put here. But then you should be able to rise above these three guna, that's what he said. Before that, Nirdvandvo, Nitya Sattvasto. So as far as possible, we should try to free ourselves from dualities. Our mind is always experiencing a state of duality. And the next sloka they say Samatva also. So as long as we try to minimize the perception of duality, we try to see the oneness, that becomes Nirdvandva Avastha. That is also a very high state. Nitya Sattvasto, as we said that you should be more of Sattva, that's a prerequisite for transcending that. And Nidyoga Kshema. So why Nidyoga Kshema? Because in Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter also Bhagavan says, Ananya Sinjan Kamaidena Paripasate, Tesham Nityam Yuktanam, Yoga Kshema Mahanyam. That's a very favorite sloka. If you have completely surrendered to Lord, Lord will take care of our yoga and kshema. So what is meant by that? Yoga is attaining something, getting something which we do not have. And kshema is preserving. The whole of our life is spent in this. Gaining what we do not have, preserving what we have gained. Sometimes more life is spent in preserving than gaining, if you see, analyze the whole thing. So Bhagavan says that it may be good in some relative sense, but the one who has abiding faith in Ishvara, he says, Niryoga Kshema means don't worry much, don't think much about creation and preservation. Why? Because God Himself will take care of that. So in that chapter it says that Yoga Kshema will take care, but here is Niryoga Kshema. Don't think too much about generating things what you don't have and preserving. Whatever you need, God will provide that. Only thing we need to have is Ananya Shraddha. And that is what we have seen. See, if we relate with the life of Bhagavan, I think that is absolutely not parallel to that. And if you read that biography, that autobiography, you will be in tears. That whatever little acquisition he had distributed, everything to that, ultimately puts everything in that particular hometown which he had, without informing anybody. Dr. Kuku Swami at the time, not even sannyasi, he moves out, he goes to Varanasi, gives whatever wealth which he had, and ultimately it is mentioned, that whenever in the Haridwar station he was there, and there was shivering cold, and some gentleman just puts a coat on his head. The one who has given his life, he says, first time I received him. So that Ananya Shraddha and Yoga and Kshema, the society will take care of us. God will take care. Society in form of God in form of society also will take care of that. So that is a very good verse also. Then another verse which many of you cited yesterday also has got very good meaning. Where is the Karmanya Vadikaraste, Ma Phaleshu Kadachana, Ma Karmafal Hetuhu, Mati Sangotsu Akarmani. The first part everybody says, that Karmanya Vadikaraste means your right is in karma. In the Shankar Bhashya also they say Karma Nishtha. Karma Nishtha is meant for everybody. And that is why we have to start from karma. In Shankar Bhashya they say, Ma Phaleshu Kadachan, the simple meaning is don't have expectation of fruits. But the deeper meaning is you are not fit for Jnana Nishtha. That is what Adi Shankara says. So after reading all this Bhagavad Gita, ultimately if you want to get to the ultimate depth, you have to go to Shankar Bhashya. That gives the ultimate truth about the whole Bhagavad Gita. And then he says that you are not fit for Jnana Nishtha. You are fit only for Karma Nishtha. So, motive of fruits of action should not be your goal. Why? Because the motive is the goal. What will happen? Always it will lead to some kind of fruit. Because God is very kind that whatever we do, and it doesn't mean karma phala will not come here. Whenever we perform the karma phala is bound to accrue. as per the law of cause and effect. So not accepting fruit doesn't mean you are denying fruit, Fruits are going to come, but you are not motivated, you are not implied to work or do the action because of the fruit. Fruits are going to come. Let it come in whatever way it comes, you don't worry about that. That's the whole thing. So do the action, Ishwararpana Buddhi, and whatever fall comes, then take as Ishwar Prasad. So when you take as Ishwar Prasad, any kind of prasad that you take, we don't have complaints about that. Prasad was good, prasad was bad. So Ishwararpana, Karma and Prasada Buddhi, that's the definition of Karma Yoga. But the most important thing is Mate Sambodhsva Akarmani. That is what people are forgetting. Let they not be attached to inaction, Thinking that, there are no fruits I have to bother, then why do I work like that? No. Work has to go on. As I said, individual, collective, work is very important. Mate Sambodhsva Akarmani. Never be attached to inaction. That's a disaster. That's a gateway to hell. Never think of that. Karma done in a spirit of yoga. That's Karma Yoga. Now then, Bhagavan says he is very kind that somebody will think that if I am not to do work with the expectation of fruits, then what way I should work? I know how to work, but without expecting how I have to work. And again, in the next 48 verse, Bhagavan gives an answer. Yogastaha guru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhaya samabhutva samatvam yogachya. So you don't do the actions with the sake of expectation of fruit. But then how do you do? Yogastaha. Attaching yourself with the divine. Attuning yourself with the divine. Before you do the work, after you do the work, you always do, you are doing work as a part of divine will. Swami Sivananda Maharaj has mentioned somewhere that our individual will has to be attained, has to be joined with the God's will. And you have to find out what is God's will for me, and then we should accordingly. He never wanted Divinized Society to be started. He never wanted that people, there should be ashram around him. But some point or other people suggested, and that this ashram is required for the continuation, for the longer benefit of mankind, everything. He introspected. And then he said that divine will is this. And I have to merge my individual will into divine will. That is called as Yogastha Karmani Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya. No kind of attachment. So here what Adi Shankara says also, that when I do the work, offer it to the Lord, I should not have the attachment that may Lord be pleased with me. That's what he says. It's very difficult to think like that. Because the minimum we think, what is wrong with that? We're thinking like that. We think that if I do the action for the Lord's sake, and if I offer it to the Lord, then why should I not think Lord be pleased with me? But if I don't have that kind of asakti also, that Lord will please me and he give me this and that like that, little bit the whole change will be there. So he said that Lord be pleased, that God will be pleased with you, that's a different thing. But don't have that kind of expectation also that I am doing the work because Lord will please with me. And that is Siddha Siddhaya Samabhutva. That is whatever Siddhi happens to me means, that Siddhi here doesn't mean the Siddhi in the ordinary sense of the worldly activity. Right? Siddhi ultimately means that Antahkarana gets purified, and purified Antahkarana reveals to the knowledge of the Atman. That is Siddhi here. And Asiddhi is being unable to do that. That is how, that if I am not able to do this, not able to attain this, then that means again there is some karma phala left out and be reborn like that, and then ultimately that means Bhagavan says that be it that way, Siddhi or Asiddhi, whatever. Don't even think about that. Samatvam Uchita, So you have to just have full evenness about that. Even if rebirth is there, that's fine. And that is why in Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter, we hear about Yoga Bhrashta Atma. So Yoga Bhrashta is not a bad word, understand. When you say Bhrashta, you always think Bhrashta is somebody corrupt like that. But Yoga Bhrashta is not a bad word, first of all. Correct? So if you are doing the path of yoga and fail to achieve your goal in some way, that is what Yoga Bhrashta. So that also is born in a family, and his sadhana and his progress continues. Well, there is no going back here. If our interior is pure, offering to the Lord, never ever wrong happens to him. Even if there are plenty of difficulties, ultimately he is there to take care of the ultimate point. And Guru, God in form of Guru only comes to us. Right? Because Guru, how do we visualize what is Ishvara? In form of Guru he comes to us and takes us to this point. Well, the more there, this is there, but maybe that is a part of that Jnana connection. So that is what maybe we'll try to cover it further. So this is how God has inspired us to think on these lines, that from inaction to action, then to Karma Yoga, then to Jnana Yoga practice as Buddhist sannyasi, or living life in spirit of renunciation, and ultimately we will be able to attain that state of Naistunya Gurnya, as they say, and that's the ultimate goal, as they say, transcendental truth of life. That's the goal. But you are not to worry about the infinitude or the subtleness of that. What is right, we are doing the right path. We have done the right path, destination is gone. Today, tomorrow, whenever. Don't think about that. So let God enable us to proceed and pursue sadhana in our path through what is called as God realization by today. Thank you.